Hey, what is up you guys? You're watching Team APS. I'm Paul.
And I'm Alec.
And today we're going to be helping you guys out.
We're going to figure out, why does your deck keep losing?
Spoiler alert, it's not the money you spent.
But first, a quick announcement.
So as you guys know, we like Yu-Gi-Oh! And we also like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. However, we aren't always able to make anime videos on this channel as much as we'd probably like to.
So that's why we were really excited when we were contacted by Amino to start developing stories for their platform.
Yeah, Amino, for those of you guys who don't know, is basically just kind of an interest-driven app. You can download it and literally just kind of follow comics and games and
Whatever
cosplay.
you like.
So for us, of course, it's anime. We've been making a few different stories on there, and they sponsored today's video, so we wanted to tell you about a couple of stories we've made on there.
5 classic monsters of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, and also Dark Magician's greatest hits.
Yeah, which, I mean, you know, Dark Magician has a lot of different forms, so I think it kind of makes sense.
If you're not satisfied with how much we give you on YouTube, go ahead, hop onto Amino, and there's even more Team APS right there.
Back to the video. Before we get into these tips, I wanted to say that this isn't one of those like meta versus non-meta things. It's not like, oh, your opponent's playing a $1,000 deck and you're not, and that's why you lost.
Because you will win or lose regardless of what level of the game you're playing.
Yeah, if it's a lower tier deck versus lower tier deck, it still comes down to, skill, strategy, and what we'll be focusing on, deck building.
And choices that you make during.
So what is the first tip we've got?
How many cards are actually in your deck?
Yeah, that's a big one. As you know in Yu-Gi-Oh! You can run a minimum of 40 cards.
And a maximum of 60.
And we've even said in the past, it's okay to run more than 40 cards. However, it's important that you do know why you're running the amount of cards that you're running. Traditionally, 40 is the strongest option. It gives you the most consistency, the highest likelihood of seeing the cards that you want to see.
But there have been formats and like certain decks that have pushed it way up to 60.
The thing about running 60 cards or 50 cards or just really any high deck count is you still need to make sure that your strategy actually supports it. So if you're running a deck that's got loads and loads of search power and filters through the deck quickly, then running more than 40 cards is usually fine.
But if you're running like, let's say something like Super Heavy Samurai, where there isn't that strong power and it's a monster mash deck, maybe you shouldn't run 60?
Yeah, and that that goes across the board. A common trend I see is people are building a deck and they like each of these different cards and they're like, oh, well, I'll just include them all. But what that ultimately causes to happen is
the anime effect.
The anime effect. The good segue. No, but I mean, it basically means that you will draw the important cards less and less, and you'll end up with those duds more and more.
And a lot of times when you do that, you'll realize you're just stuffing your deck full of a bunch of situational cards that you probably don't even need.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, those cards could go in the side deck instead. And speaking of situational cards, that's actually the next point.
Like, what are these cards even for?
Yeah,
right?
Yu-Gi-Oh's got, and I hate to say it because there are so many cool looking cards. Like you read it and you think, oh, this could be really useful in this situation, or this could be really useful when I set this thing up.
And essentially that was the idea that Yu-Gi-Oh was founded upon with traps like Mirror Force and Magic Cylinder. These things that have very specific requirements, but they'll just change the game all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I think of some archetype specific ones, Harpy Lady's Phoenix formation, or something that, requires you to have like 3 of these monsters on the field, and it has a really strong effect, but then what you realize is a card like that isn't really useful on like your first turn, because you won't have 3 monsters, so you can't use it, and it's just clogging your hand.
And some decks can make certain situations happen more than others. That's why you can, like running Dark Arm, then like dark themed decks like Orcus can make more sense than running it in, well, like Lightsworn.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want a card that's like too difficult for you to summon, or a spell or trap that's just too difficult to set up to be worth it.
I think one of my favorite examples is actually the Pendulum draw card.
Oh yeah, that's
Pot of Riches, right? Mm-hmm. Where you have to have cards already in the extra deck face up for it to even resolve.
Yeah. And Pendulum Halt's like that too. Those cards seem so good on paper. Pot of Riches reminds me of like Pot of Dichotomy and those types of cards. Pot of Inquisitiveness. They seem like they'd be useful, but like they take so much setup that
it doesn't happen as often as you like it to.
Yeah, and another thing, tip 3, check your deck ratios. Because, you might be running cards that are good, but just in the wrong ratios.
Not every card needs to be at 3. But the ones you want, the ones you need, you gotta be at 3.
Yeah, so the golden sort of rule of thumb that I always follow is a card's at 3 if you really want to see it in an opening hand, and that's the goal. A card's at 2 if you want to see it, but you don't want to see 2 copies of it. A card that comes to mind, I guess, is maybe Pot of Desires, for instance, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
You don't want to use Pot of Desires and draw another copy of Pot of Desires.
Way too clunky.
It really hurts. And there are plenty of cards like that. And then a card that you run at 1 is usually either limited to 1.
Or it's a one-off combo card that you can search easily.
Yeah, you can search it and you only need to see it once. Nightmare Corruptor Ibli. That's a random one that just kind of comes to mind for me. And so the way that I basically see it is if you're not getting your ratios right, then even good cards can suddenly become not so good cards.
Muy malo.
Yeah, and that kind of ties in with earlier tips about can you actually summon this monster consistently? If it's a big boss monster, yeah, that's cool. Elemental Lords, for instance. They're strong, they have great effects, but if you're running them in really high ratios,
yeah, that's all you're gonna see.
Yeah, you'll open up your opening hand and have 4 Elemental Lords in your Element Saber deck, and you can't summon them, and your strategy's clunky. So,
right. And it's not always that simple. My personal anecdote is Cosmos. Those big ships are really annoying to figure out their ratios.
Yeah, sometimes it's you want them, but you don't want them, and that's where deck testing really comes in.
Right.
So the next one is, can you actually summon that monster? Which I guess we've kind of alluded to already. There are a lot of monsters that are
big,
they're
right?
huge, right? This thing has 4,000 attack.
10 stars.
It can do all this crazy stuff. But can you summon it?
Can it
reasonably?
Can it leave your hand or extra deck and actually get on the field?
Yeah, that's a really big one. Nirvana High Paladin, for whatever reason. That was what I was trying to think of earlier. We were planning this video.
Oh, that's right.
It's one of those cards that, it kind of takes a lot of trouble to summon. Necroz of Sophia.
Ooh.
Right? Yu-Gi-Oh! Has this thing with a lot of archetypes where they'll make the archetype, be pretty decent, and then they'll give it a very strong boss that's just a little bit harder to summon than it should be.
Oh, speaking of Cosmos from earlier, Dark Planet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dark Planet's he's a toughie.
Yep.
I think with True Draco, Metaltron 12, the bigger masterpiece or whatever. I think that's what his name is. Yeah, and he takes 3 tributes, so he can, in theory, be immune to everything if you tribute through a monster, a spell, and a trap.
Speaking of Draco, Masterpiece, the true Draco Slayer, the one that uses a Slayer and over and over.
Oh, the old one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of monsters like that. They're strong. It seems attractive to include them in your deck and bring them out, but what you realize is the summoning conditions are just too hard to meet, and it's just not going to be worth it.
So you would think, oh, it's okay to have to set up a strategy to summon a monster, but no.
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very early game centric, for better or worse. So if it's something that you're just not going to be able to actually get out in the first few turns, it'll just hold you back.
Your deck kind of has to naturally reach that point. A very meta example is Thunder Dragons.
Oh, right.
Both of their fusions have these pretty specific summon effects from extra deck, but Thunder Dragons, they've actively pitched themselves from the hand. They meet that condition by themselves.
Yeah.
Our next tip is, how many normal summons are you running?
Yeah, this is one that it feels really weird to say because it's definitely a sign of the times in this game.
That's true. At one point, almost all of your cards were normal summons.
Yeah, the way that Yu-Gi-Oh! Works now is you get lots of special summons in a turn, right?
You better. But
only 1 normal summon. So what does that mean? That means that you want to run cards that have good normal summon effects. A Thunder Dragon example. Batteryman Solar.
He's cool.
He's a good normal summon. Aloof Lupine.
Very good.
That could be a good one. But what if you're running Thunder Dino and you also need to run Soul Eating Overraptor?
Oh, damn.
Now you have a bunch of cards. You probably want to run 3 of them. 2 to 3 of them.
But if you do that, in our old rule of threes, it gets clunky.
You'll see them a lot, but you can only normal summon 1 per turn. So when you open with 3 different monsters you want to normal summon that can't really benefit if they're summoned any other way, And
it's like, oh, my deck's really consistent, but you're stuck with a dead hand.
Yeah, these cards are dead, and like, as we said, Yu-Gi-Oh is very first turn centric. So if you're not, able to quickly get these monsters in the field, then they're just gonna be holding you back.
So what is like the preferred number of normal summons in a deck?
These days, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say you want about 6 monsters like that. 6 monsters that simply have a good unsummon effect. We're talking Trickstar Candina, Alistair the Invoker, that type of effect. Elemental Hero Stratos kind of things.
Oh, Stratos.
Because if you have more than that, they start to clog, but I feel like if you have less than that, then sometimes you actually won't draw something you can normal summon.
Ooh, and that's awful.
Yeah, that's never good.
And our last tip is, are you running too many traps?
Yeah, it's an unfortunate consequence of the speed of Yu-Gi-Oh today, but this has actually always been a thing.
It really has been, and even though traps are getting better, we're seeing more traps being run, you can still run too many.
And the reason that traps are so bad, in high numbers at least, is that traps, A, have to be set first, and B, rarely are actually like progressing your strategy, right?
Most of them can't.
Yeah, and things like Impermanence, Evenly Matched, all of that stuff, Solemn Strike.
Bottomless.
They're great cards, they really are, but just drawing them means that you're not actually summoning anything, making any combos.
Unless you're playing Paleo, you're not actually doing anything.
Yeah, you're not attacking your opponent, and so you don't want to run a load of trap cards. And in a 40 card deck, what would you say is like a safe number of traps?
Ooh. 5.
Yeah, something like that. That's what I was gonna say. 5, maybe 6. Some decks it's different. Some decks can search their traps, or maybe you're running, Altergeist, Paleo, like you said, Guru Control or something, True Draco.
And if you can't search your traps, if you're running like 1 or 2, just don't do it.
Yeah, sometimes it's best to just kind
don't run
of
'em.
leave traps out. They're good in the side deck.
Yeah, traps are great
place
for the side because there are very powerful traps in this game that hit very specific strategies, and you can just save them when you need them.
Yeah, and I think that's sometimes the best way to do it.
Called floodgates. Summon limits, my favorite.
Yeah, there's a lot of obnoxious ones. So yeah, those are some tips to consider when you're building your next deck. Like I said, how many cards are you running? Are you running too many traps? Are these situational things gonna show up?
It's like, next time you're in tournament or even playing friendlies and you lose and you're kind of frustrated, just like think about this list and say, well, am I doing any of these things?
Yeah, because it's oftentimes your specific deck list that might be holding you back, not just the tier of your deck. So anywho, hopefully this video was helpful and we gave you guys something useful that you can use moving forward to play against your friends or in tournaments.
Don't forget to check out Amino Apps. We'll have a link in the description.
Yeah, so if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe. Shout outs to all of our new channel members. We really appreciate you guys. Pretty cool. And that's gonna be it. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Pass turn.